Hello, and welcome to this Getting to Know the Specification session for the T-Level Technical Qualification in Craft and Design, focusing on the Occupational Specialisms. In this session, we will give a brief overview of the content and assessments of each of the Occupational Specialism components within the T-Level in Craft and Design. Some information is common to all occupational specialisms, so it was recommended that you watch the introduction to the content before skipping to your relevant specialism. It is also recommended that if you haven't previously watched the Getting to Know the Specification introduction video and core component video, that you do so prior to watching this video. As a brief reminder, the T-Level is made up of two mandatory components, the core and the occupational specialism. Here you can see that in the Craft and Design T-Level, the core component contributes 30% to the overall qualification grade and is 360 guided learning hours. The Occupational Specialism component contributes 70% to the overall qualification grade and is 840 guided learning hours. This is an overview of the Occupational Specialism component. There are 5 occupational specialisms to choose from within the Craft and Design T-Level: ceramics maker, jewellery maker, textiles and fashion maker, furniture maker, and furniture maker with an upholsterer option. Each occupational specialism is 840 guided learning hours and is assessed through 2 tasks which each include a series of activities. Each specialism follows the same structure of assessment. Task 1 is design and make in response to a brief, and Task 2 is make to a specification. The briefs for each task are slightly different as they are specific to the specialism, but assessed very similar performance outcomes in the same way across them. Likewise, the timings for each task are similar, with some variation based on the technical differences between specialism, for example firing and drying times in ceramics. We'll look at the assessments for each of the occupational specialisms in more detail in just a moment. Students must undertake the core component and one of the occupational specialisms, as well as undertake the industry placement in order to complete the T-Level qualification. The core and occupational specialist components can be delivered however you feel is best for your students. The integration of their industry placement and access to expertise and resources at your centre. For more information on delivery, please make sure you attend our Getting Ready to Teach events and read the delivery guides for the core and occupational specialisms. This is how the specification is laid out for each occupational specialism. This example shows the start of Performance Outcome 2 for ceramics maker, refine and communicate ideas for creative product development. Each of the other occupational specialisms will follow this same format. In the grey box, we have the first specialist skill covered by this performance outcome. You'll see the first skill statement, CRS 2.1, develop initial ideas for further development and assess suitability for the required function. Requirements, the CR is ceramics and the S denotes skill as opposed to knowledge, which is represented by a K. Within each performance outcome there are several skills listed. On screen you can see the first 2 out of 5 for performance outcome 2. In the lower right hand corner of each skills statement, note the references in brackets. For example, you can see D2, D5, E4 and E5 in relation to skill statement 2.1. These are references to the General Competencies Framework which you will find in the appendix of the specification. In this example, they signify the general digital and English competencies that your students will be able to demonstrate by developing these skills. Following the skills statements for the performance outcome, the underpinning knowledge your students will need is listed. Here is a sample of part of the related knowledge content. CRS 2.1 Ways to communicate ideas, and CRS 2.2 Use industry standard language and symbols to communicate design and requirements. Each performance outcome is expanded through related skills and knowledge content in this way throughout each occupational specialism. Now let's look at each occupational specialism in more detail. First, we'll look at the ceramics maker occupational specialism. Throughout this section of the presentation, we'll use the ceramics maker occupational specialism as an example, but it represents the structure and assessment tasks of all the other occupational specialisms available. Each occupational specialism has 5 performance outcomes. These are very similar across all of the occupational specialisms. As discussed on the previous slide, within the specification content, each performance outcome is broken down into a number of skill statements. These are what your students are expected to be able to do or demonstrate. There are also a number of underpinning knowledge statements related to each performance outcome, which set out what students need to know and understand in order to be able to demonstrate the skills. Your students will be assessed on their application of the skills listed in the performance outcomes. However, they will not be assessed directly against knowledge content. Instead, they will be expected to draw on and apply underpinning knowledge when applying the skills in response to the activities in the tasks. This is the scheme of assessment page for Ceramics Maker, taken from the specification, which details key information about the assessment. There is one for each occupational specialism following the teaching and learning content for the specialism. As mentioned, each occupational specialism has 2 project-based assessment tasks, each of which contain a series of synoptic activities that collectively assess the breadth of knowledge and skills in the content. The synoptic element of the tasks are important to ensure students can demonstrate threshold competence and are able to evidence all of the skills required by the performance outcomes. Task 1, Design and make in response to a brief, requires students to interpret the Pearson set brief and conduct research, experimentation with materials, techniques and processes, gather feedback on their ideas, prepare and pitch a presentation, test, plan for production, produce the final outcome, and finally, evaluate the process and outcome. For Ceramics Maker as an example, Task 1 is completed up to a combined duration of 65 hours and 50 minutes. It consists of 9 substantive parts which total 189 marks. Task 2, Make to a Specification, requires students to prepare materials and produce an artifact or artifacts to a given technical specification set by Pearson, undertake quality checks, and evaluate the outcome. For Ceramics Maker, as an example, Task 2 is completed up to a combined duration of 21 hours. It consists of 5 substantive parts, which total 87 marks. Note that the number of parts within Task 2 varies in each occupational specialism. Your students will undertake these tasks under supervised assessment conditions which are specified for each activity. Each occupational specialism assessment is assessed internally by you, the provider, and then a sample will be moderated by Pearson. The final mark achieved for the occupational specialism will determine the grade, which will be awarded at pass, merit, or distinction. All tasks will be completed during a window set by Pearson, during which you will schedule supervised assessment sessions. We will look at an indicative assessment schedule in a moment. Each task will present the student with an overarching scenario through a brief, which links the activities together. The scenario will always place the students in the role of the ceramics maker or the relevant maker for each of the occupational specialisms, producing work to meet the requirements of the brief. For Task 2, the project's outcomes will consist of physical items that have been made to a set specification, supported by a portfolio of evidence submitted electronically. You should refer to the individual task guidance included within the assessments for further information on how to facilitate each task and how to collate and submit evidence. Now, let's look at each task in more detail. There are 9 parts that make up the overall Task 1 project. This is the case for all occupational specialisms. For Ceramics Maker, Task 1 is a total of 65 hours and 50 minutes, but the duration will vary slightly for each occupational specialism. We'll look at each part of the task now, using ceramics as an example, but bear in mind that each occupational specialism has the same 9 parts and each one follows a very similar format and assessment focus. Task 1A, Interpret the brief and conduct research, is split into 2 activities completed over 3 hours 30 minutes for 15 marks. In this task, students will review a client brief, conduct research, and produce a production plan. Task 1B, Ideas and experimentation with materials, techniques and processes, is split into 2 activities completed over 10 hours for 27 marks. In this task, students will generate initial ideas and experiment with a range of ceramics materials, techniques and processes. Based on this, they will create slides of 3 ideas. Task 1C, presentation, feedback and refinement of ideas, is split into 3 activities completed over 3 hours for 15 marks. In this task, students will present slides of their 3 ideas from Task 1B to peers, receive feedback, select a final idea, and produce an annotated drawing of the chosen work. Task 1D, pitch preparation, is also split into 2 activities completed over 5 hours for 21 marks. In this task, students will calculate estimated costings and timeline and prepare slides for a pitch presentation. Task 1E, pitch presentation, is also split into 2 activities completed over 1 hour 20 minutes for 15 marks. In this task, students will deliver their pitch presentation, answer follow-up questions, and reflect and respond to the client's needs. Task 1F, final design testing phase, is split into 2 activities completed over 6 hours for 24 marks. In this task, students will carry out tests on materials, techniques and processes, then finalize all preparation for making the final work. Task 1G, produce final technical drawings, final costings and final production schedule, is split into 2 activities completed over 5 hours for 24 marks. In this task, students will produce the final technical drawings to be used in making their outcome, update their costings and complete a production schedule and contingency plan. Task 1H, make and complete work, is split into 2 activities completed over 31 hours for 39 marks. This is the largest part of the task, where students will make the final work, documenting the setup, production and cleanup process in each session and then present completed work. Task 1I, evaluation, is a single activity completed over 2 hours for 9 marks. In this task, students will evaluate the design, production and final work in relation to the brief and consider improvements, aftercare and packaging. Throughout these tasks, some activities include templates which are provided along with the assessments. Now let's look at Task 2. As mentioned previously, the number of parts that make up Task 2 and the duration of the tasks varies for each occupational specialism. For ceramics maker, as an example, there are 5 parts done over a total of 21 hours. Again, we'll look at each part of the task using ceramics as an example, and while each specialism has a different number of parts in Task 2, bear in mind that each one follows a very similar format and assessment focus in relation to their own specialist skills. Please note that while ceramics maker has 3 separate physical outcomes, the other occupational specialisms have either 1 or 2 outcomes depending on the specialism. Task 2A, prepare clay, slabs and template, then make coil form, is split into 4 activities split over 6 hours for 27 marks. In this task, students will review technical specifications and prepare materials and make a specified coiled form. Task 2B, cut slabs, assemble planter and decorate coiled form, is split into 2 activities completed over 6 hours for 21 marks. In this task, students will review technical specifications and prepare materials and make a specified slab piece and slip decorated coil piece. Task 2C, throw and finish a lidded container, is a single activity completed over 6 hours for 15 marks. In this task, students will review technical specifications and prepare materials and make a thrown lidded container. Task 2D, glaze the lidded container and undertake final quality checks, is a single activity completed over 2 hours for 9 marks. In this task, students will prepare the lidded container, glaze, fire and undertake quality checks and package the final piece. Task 2E, evaluation, is also a single activity completed over 1 hour for 9 marks. In this task, students will evaluate the production process and final work in relation to the technical specifications. Throughout these tasks, some activities include templates which are provided along with the assessments. There will be 1 series of assessment for the Occupational Specialism project per academic year. This is due to the large amount of content produced, the time it takes to undertake, and the synopticity required. To give you as much teaching time as possible, and avoiding the ESP window and the core examination dates so as not to disadvantage students needing access to resits, the project will take place over several weeks across the spring and summer terms. The assessment window is set by Pearson, and start and finish dates of the window will be published annually in the key dates schedule. This can be found on the Training and Admin Support section of the T-Levels webpage. On the screen is an example timetable that gives you a notional view of how the tasks might be organised over the window. However, please note this example is indicative and adjustments may be made in live delivery to account for variables such as the changeable dates of Easter holidays and the placement of school and bank holidays. As you can see, the tasks have been spread out over 13 weeks. You'll note there is plenty of space for each task to allow for students who require access arrangements, especially additional time, to complete their assessments without tasks overlapping. Where students suffer from illness during the assessment, because the timetabling of each task in this occupational specialism are managed by you, the provider, the student will be able to complete the assessment at a different time to the remainder of the cohort, so long as this takes place within the set assessment window. If the student is too unwell to attempt the task at all within the window, then they will be able to apply for special consideration. So what can you do next to prepare for delivery? Firstly, familiarise yourself with the specification and specimen assessment materials. Make sure you sign up to receive our monthly T-Level e-bulletin, which you can do by visiting the T-Level homepage on the Pearson website. Book onto our Getting Ready to Teach and Getting Ready to Assess events, which you can also access from the Training and Admin Support section of the T-Levels homepage. Watch the admin support videos in our Engagement Hub. And last, but certainly not least, make use of the wealth of free course materials we provide to support you, including delivery guides, schemes of work, guide standards exemplification materials, and administrative support guides. As a reminder, if you have further questions, there are a number of ways you can contact us. The most direct method is via the Pearson support portal. Thank you for listening to this information video. I hope you found it useful.